The picture in the upper right-hand corner is a rain garden, and this water from the street is actually going into that rain garden, so then it's going to go down into the soil. It's going to be cleaned as it goes down into the soil, and our primary source of drinking water is the aquifer. So what we want is for the water to go down into the soil as opposed to running off into the sewer. It helps filter pollutants. It can increase property values. But it has to be a tree that's well placed and well maintained. If you're not taking good care of your tree, if it has a lot of dead wood or you pruned it improperly, that's not going to add value and might actually be, taking away from the phrase, the curbside appeal that realtors say you need to have if people are going to be interested in buying your house. It does sequester carbon, trees do. It can provide habitat for wildlife, birds, small mammals. Sometimes the wildlife that comes is what you want. Other times it may bring in some that you don't want, but all in all, it can create good wildlife habitat. So oxygen production is primarily the result of photosynthesis. And plants and trees are amazing. They can't move, but they can manufacture their own food by using the sun and taking in carbon dioxide and giving off oxygen. So in each individual leaf, we have this process going on. And when I look out and see leaves, they're beautiful fluttering in the wind, but inside is a lot of complex science going on as they use the sun to manufacture food. You need a microscope to see all the little pores that let off oxygen, that close up if it gets hot. So it's a very complex organism, but to us when we look out I just see beauty, pine needles, sweet gum leaves, the various shapes and colors and sizes of leaves, but inside all of them is photosynthesis happening and just the basic process of using sunlight, air, water, and nutrients. And the tree roots take up the water and nutrients, the leaves absorb the sunlight using chlorophyll, and then we get carbohydrates and sugars that the tree can use, and we get the oxygen that's released as a result of that process. When I'm talking to groups of kids and we say trees give us oxygen, so could we live without trees? There are microbes, algae that do produce oxygen, but trees and plants are the primary source of the oxygen that we breathe. Then the other question is, could trees live without us? Yes, some of them might do better off without us, because then we would not be clearing acres and acres, to develop. We can give trees a good start. We can take care of trees and prolong their lives, so we can be helpful to trees, but generally they're going to do just fine without us if they're left to grow naturally. So that's important to remember. This is a lot. We don't have to go through all the life forms. Trees became trees because as plant life evolved, vascular systems were developed in trees. And by vascular system, it's I'm going to forward here. So we have the xylem and the phloem. You guys, I don't know how far removed you are from plant biology. The xylem and the phloem are essentially the tubes that connect the root system of the tree and the top of the tree. And there's always an exchange of water and nutrients up and down so that the tree can support itself. Because if it makes food in the top, it needs to have water. If it can't get water from the root system, it's not going to be able to photosynthesize. The roots need energy to work, but if the food made at the top of the tree can't get down to the roots, then we have a system that is not going to be able to continue. So because vascular systems were created, now you can have a 30, 40, 60 foot tall plant and it still can do what it needs to do to survive. Ferns have a little bit of a vascular system, but the primary difference of them from trees is that they reproduce through spores. They don't have flowers, so they don't need pollinators, but also ferns aren't producing the many fruits and nuts and things that trees do for us to use. So this, just the progression of seeds, seed types. Some are, I did bring some show and tell stuff. I should use it. This is, I'll pass these around. Does everyone know the bottle brush tree?
Yes.
Yeah, with the red blossoms. This is a relative of that from the same genus. It came from Australia. It's called Banksia. And that is the seed pod. So each of those holes would have had a seed in it. And this is what it actually looks like on the inside. I had the wonderful opportunity to visit Australia, and my husband and I were shopping somewhere and saw these really cool vases and pens, and we thought, well, they're, what kind of wood are those made from? But they're actually made from the seed pod, because when you put it on a lathe, it's hard. So that would be a tree you might not want to sit in the shade underneath without a hard hat or something on, because the sheer weight of that. Other types of seed dispersal, this is a pine cone, and each when this was closed up, inside would have been one seed in each of those. I don't know if there's any left inside. Have you ever seen a seed drop from the pine cone up high, and does it just fall straight to the ground? Or does it it's sort of like a helicopter wing, and it will float in the air. And why would you think a seed would have that characteristic?
Dispersal.
Yes, dispersal. Some disperse by sticking to your pant legs or the fur of an animal. Others use the wind. Others use animals to eat them, like acorns, and primarily spread because after they pass through a digestive system. Some have berries that the birds would eat, and then they distribute the berries. So the differences in seed containers there's a huge variety, and they can be very helpful when you're trying to identify a certain type of tree. If you can find the nut or the seed, that can be a great source of information to help you identify that tree. So gymnosperms and angiosperms just describe the different way that the seed is presented. And then there's pretty solid science on how trees came to be from the original plant life, from non-vascular plants. Yes?
Like the pine cone from the pine tree, and each have a yard full of pine tree. It's huge. And when I saw the sequoia tree, I was flabbergasted that the pine cone or the seed, is it the pine cone or the seed, the drops, it's so tiny.
Yeah, it is I don't know if it's called a cone, but it has little holes in it that tiny seeds would
So
come out of.
why the difference in size? It's just the luck of the evolutionary track.
Some of it might be that, a tall tree, if you have a very heavy seed pod and it goes crashing down, it's gonna just shatter. Yeah. So those little droops or yes, they are. It was the first time I saw it, I was stunned. You have this giant, just really majestic tree. Sequoias are the same way, where the seed itself is very small. Now, on one tree are hundreds and hundreds, because the percentage survival rate is pretty low, no matter what type of tree you're looking at. Others, I didn't bring the whole thing, but there's a pine that grows out west called digger pine, and this would be the same as that little thing. So digger pine, and inside is a seed. So this actually needs a squirrel, some type of animal, to open that up in order for the seed to disperse. But those cones weigh a lot. They also sit upright. A lot of cones are pendant, they call them, but the digger sits upright because if it hung down, the chances of it ripping off and falling are greater because just the sheer, gravity is gonna work against it. So this is, again, a very large seed that would need an animal to eat it in order for it to go through. So a lot of, plants, you can get very, very detailed information about, why they have the type of seeds that they have. But primarily it has to do with, I think, being sure that seeds are spread far enough out that each can get what it needs to grow. Yeah.
Yeah, is the digger pine fire dependent then? If it needs its seed opened, is fire dependent?
No, it's animals.
Just animals.
The cone will open, but the seed is inside of that, I'm drawing a blank on all the scientific terms tonight. The
Pod or the?
each of these little arms, umbos, these are called umbos. This, instead of, with most pines where the seed is easily removed with that little wing, those seeds are actually encapsulated in this umbo.
Well, the reason I asked, the sand pine here in
Yes.
Florida is fire dependent.
Yes,
So,
sand pine, you find it on, scrubby areas, sandy, really, kind of stark areas. And those cones are what's called serotinous, so they actually need a source of heat to open up. Sometimes it's fire, but sometimes it's just being exposed to the sun will open it up. Just like if you ever have a pine cone that hasn't opened and you put it on the dashboard of your car, you'll come back at the end of the day and the pine cone will have magically opened up for you. Yeah, I forgot to say, if you have questions, please ask them, because often it reminds me of something I wanted to say or starts a discussion about an item that I think feels important. We already talked about, trees can reduce runoff, filter pollutants. They store carbon and sequester carbon. And it's the forest, it's going on all the time. And as a forester, I need to remind everyone that trees are an agricultural product in many respects. There are over 5,000 items that we would describe as a wood product, which means they either come completely from trees or they have one component in them that comes from trees. Some of them are surprising to people, soap, medicines, things like a hard hat. Trees have cellulose in them, and if that cellulose is heated and compacted, it becomes very, very dense and strong, like toothbrushes, eyeglass frames. There are some man-made alternatives for some of the products, but trees, when they're harvested, the forest industry tries to use every bit of that tree. And yes.
Using trees, I think on Facebook, whatever, I keep getting this ad for bamboo toilet paper. Don't take down the trees and, use the bamboo that grows faster and all of this. Ecologically, what's better to use, because, the forests are renewable.
So, which do you think is ecologically better?
Right, because bamboo grows faster, will take less, I don't know, but, it's not bad to cut down the trees, because we do use them for things, and then we
Right.
put new ones up.
Right. Bamboo is a valuable, it's not really a tree, but it's a valuable
grass.
plant. The issue in the United States is that bamboo is not native here, and the way that it spreads, it's considered an invasive exotic plant. When it's where it naturally occurs, primarily Asia, there are insect and disease and just climate issues that keep it from becoming a nuisance and interfering with native plants. But yeah, there's bamboo, it's actually looks like wood. You can have bamboo flooring, bamboo bowls, bamboo paper. So I think any source is good as long as it's the process that you continue. If you harvest your bamboo once and utilize it, but then you're going to develop the property, certainly it was good to utilize the bamboo instead of just burning it, but now you transition to a land use that isn't gonna be, green anymore. There are some plants that grow fast, and you'll see those little blurbs that'll say, plant this, you'll be a millionaire in 20 years because you'll have a harvest every year and you'll be doing good. But most of the time, those are non-natives that could really cause problems ecologically. Yes?
Well, it seems to me the next best popular thing that you put in the soil, because, you go everywhere and you see these huge bamboos. And it's like, it's all of a sudden, I've lived here a long time and I've, dug in the dirt a lot too.
Yes.
And all of a sudden, I'm seeing these, you look up there.
I think it's partially,
Yeah.
that it's popping up as all of a sudden people are getting advertisements about planting bamboo. It's inexpensive, it grows fast, so they see those characteristics, and I don't imagine the ad you saw had a little fine print that said this is an invasive exotic plant, category 1,
Well,
that
and
is threatening our,
what
native ecosystems.
Right.
So it is.
This was specifically about buying the toilet paper from some company as compared to cutting down a tree that that it was gonna be bad to cut down trees to make toilet paper.
And it can be, proper forest management, just like with just like with our water system, trying to keep our lakes clean. It's easy to talk about how it should be done, but actually enacting that can be challenging. Sometimes it costs money initially to maintain your forest in a healthy setting. You will get a return when you harvest your trees, but it's sustainable forest management is practiced for the most part with landowners, with government land holdings, but there are situations where it's not, and oftentimes that's what gets the notice, and then it's just like with prescribed burning, that the smoke you have now is better than from a wildfire, but if you're a person with asthma or you want to open your windows and there's prescribed fire smoke out there, you may have forgotten what's better about this compared to to a wildfire. I've been giving the signal that it's 8:15, so I'm going to go rapidly forward to.
I do want to mention though that trees, you have to think how big they are, how much space they take up, and if you're talking about a commercial business where they're doing it a long time, bamboo is going to be much more sustainable because not only is it faster, but it takes up less space. So you can actually produce a lot more wood in a short amount of time, less amount of space, and still get your yield at the end of the year. So I totally agree with what you're saying, but different situations it works.
One difference though is the diversity of items you can get from bamboo is less than what you could get from trees. So if market change, if suddenly no one wants bamboo flooring anymore, or it's shown that bamboo toilet paper isn't as good, then you want to diversify in anything, your investments, whatever, so that it may be that that farmer and foresters have to do the same thing, where if the market changes, you need to be ready to figure out, well, okay, how am I going to market my trees now? But yes, from a what you can produce on an acre standpoint over and over and over again, bamboo will give you a shorter turnaround time. But then it's with anything where you have to weigh, what is their benefit to wildlife from a monoculture of bamboo. Monoculture pine doesn't have a lot of wildlife habitat opportunity, but as you thin and open the forest up a little bit, you might have those opportunities. So it's just a reminder, nothing is easy. Yes.
where I live, there's a lot of people who move down from the Midwest, and the first thing they do, the community I'm in has these magnificent live oaks that are like 20, 25 years old, and they cut them down. Because I think they're terrified of the hurricanes.
Yes, yeah.
That's why they do it. And then the nice woods will replace them with palm trees. The other trees that are totally bare.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
But, so, this thing about, you know, like hurricane